Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Adam, and I'm the Senior Park Interpreter here in Whiteshell Provincial Park. The Whiteshell is located on Treaty 3 territory. That's the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Métis Nation. I want to thank you all very much for joining me this morning to learn a little bit more about what I think are some of the coolest animals on the face of the earth, owls. Now, before we get too far into anything, the first thing I'd actually like to get everybody to do, because I'm sure we're all a little tired of staring at screens at this point, is close your eyes for a second, and I just want you to listen to this sound we're going to play for you. Alrighty, you can open your eyes again. So for starters, no, that wasn't a horse on helium. That was actually one of the types of owls that we have in Manitoba. Take our online poll real quick to see if you guys can figure out what kind of owl that was. I think it was a barred owl. Maybe it was a burrowing owl. Reality is a lot of owls don't actually have that typical whoo, whoo, whoo call that we think of when we think of an owl call. We're going to see today there's a wide range of noises that our owls can make. So let's see what you guys think here. Survey says, all right, majority of you think it was the Eastern Screech Owl. For those of you that picked the Eastern Screech Owl, you are absolutely correct. That's what that noise was. The Eastern Screech Owl is one of the 11 owl species that we have in Manitoba. Now, one of the things that makes owls really cool is that they're adapted to live in pretty much every kind of habitat that we have in Manitoba, from things like the great gray owl living in the boreal forest, to the snowy owl of the Arctic tundra, and the burrowing owl living out on the prairies. They're very well adapted to do this. But even so, owls still have a very rich history themselves. We have archaeological evidence dating owls back to about 80 to 90 million years ago. One of the fossil records that we have is actually for the largest owl that we know of to ever walk the face of the earth, and that was the giant Cursorial Owl, obviously extinct today. This owl was enormous, like a lot of animals during that time frame. This owl was about 3.5 feet tall, and we figure probably about 20 pounds. Now, 20 pounds may not seem like much, but as we're going to see a little bit later on, owls don't actually weigh that much. So you can really appreciate how big this owl was. In all likelihood, that owl probably ran down its prey on the ground just because of how big it was. Probably would have eaten things like large rodents or maybe even ground sloths. Now, the indigenous peoples of this area also have a unique history with owls as well. The Anishinaabe believe that owls are bringers of important messages and lessons. Owls are frequently documented in stories coming to the aid of Anishinaabe in need. Stuffed or dried owls are often placed in healing lodges as guardians of ceremonies. And it's also believed that hearing the owl calls at night, they are supposed to be guiding the souls of deceased people into their next world. Now, beyond that, owls also appear in Greek and Roman mythology as well, from the goddess Athena, having owls being her favorite feathered creatures, to Greek soldiers at that time believing that if an owl flew over them before a battle, it was a sign of good luck. Today, owls are still revered all over the world, and folklore still thrives. For example, in France, some people believe that if an expectant mother hears an owl call, it's an omen that the child will be a girl. In Scotland, some people believe that it's bad luck to see an owl during the day. In Japan, the Screech Owl is often thought to be warning people of danger. In China, owls are sometimes associated with lightning. And even home here in Canada, in Newfoundland, some people believe that hearing the call of a great horned owl is the sign that bad weather is on the horizon. So we can see clearly that all throughout time, millions of years ago, all the way to today, owls not only have a rich history with themselves, but also with us. And one of the reasons for this is because owls have some of the most unique adaptations on the planet. And this is really what makes them special and unique. Now, for starters, before we get to owl adaptations, what the heck is an adaptation? In short, an adaptation is something an animal has on its body or a behavior the animal has that helps it live in its environment. So what kind of adaptations do owls have? Literally just about everything on their body. To help me demonstrate with this, I'm just going to grab this little guy here. This is the Eastern Screech Owl. So this is the owl that, well, not actually the owl that made the call, but the call that we heard a few minutes ago is from an Eastern Screech Owl like this. And as we can see, I mean, just from these two owls here, yes, owls do come in a variety of sizes. I'm just going to use this guy because he's a little bit lighter to hold. All owls, no matter what size they are, they all have these same adaptations that we're going to go over. And I'm literally just going to start at the head and work down the body to show you all the different things that make owls unique, starting with their head. Now, one of my favorite things about the owl is how big their eyes are. Now for this, I'm just going to grab one thing. This right here. So this is an owl skull. This is from a great horned owl. And take a look, if you can, at how big those eye sockets are. As most owls are nocturnal, they have to be able to see a little bit better than us at night. And owls, their eyes are so big that they're actually fixed in place. So there's a bit of a trade-off. They can see a lot better than us, but they can't do this. If they want to look somewhere, they have to turn their entire head. Again, because they're fixed in place. And this actually comes up, brings us to another myth about owls. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. The myth is that owls can turn their head completely around all the way like that. Not quite. They can get pretty close. They can turn it about 270 degrees, so about here. Not quite here, but here. They can do this because they have way more vertebrae in their neck than we do. Just for a little test here, everybody at home, just take your hand and feel the back of your neck. Hopefully you feel some bumps. If you don't feel some bumps, go to a doctor because you may be a squid. The bumps in the back of our neck are our vertebrae. Humans have 7 vertebrae in their neck. Owls have 14. That's twice as many as us. So that's what allows them to turn their head as far as they can. Now let's go back to our skull here. Another thing that we can see, if we look at his beak here, this beak is quite a bit different than, say, chickadees or blue jays that are designed mainly for eating seeds or small insects. This beak, no. The only thing that owls eat are meat, and they go after live prey. So that is where that beak comes in handy. In most cases, owls want to be able to swallow their food whole. This is why they'll go after things like mice, shrews, moles, and voles. They can swallow it in one shot. But for some of our larger owls that will go after things like, snowshoe hares or even jackrabbits where they may be around, they're not going to be able to swallow that whole thing whole. So they're going to be able need to tear that meat off, and that's where that beak comes in handy. Another adaptation they have on their head that's a little hard to show with either mounts or that skull is where their ears are. Now, granted, owls don't have exterior ears like us, but they do still have ear holes where they can hear things. And one of the things that makes them unique is they have what's called asymmetrical ears. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, humans have symmetrical ears, meaning that our ears are at the same level on our head. So if we could stick a stick all the way through our head, through one ear, it would come out the other. Just trust me on that. Don't actually try to do it. With an owl having asymmetrical ears, that means that one ear is a little higher up like this, and one ear is a little lower like this. So that means they have a greater advantage of hearing all the stuff going on down here and all the stuff going on up here and everything in between. In addition to that, their ears are not the only things that help them hear. Their face actually does this too. all owls have pretty much flat faces. If I turn them in profile like that, it's a flat face. All owls have faces basically built like satellite dishes. So the face itself catches more sound waves coming at them and they can hear more things. Try this little experiment with me. Just listen to me talking right now. Remember roughly how loud my voice is. Now, take your hands and cup them behind your ears like this. Now that you've got your ears like that, listen to me now. And hopefully, as long as there's no computer audio on either of our ends, I should be quite a bit louder. So that's a good example of how the asymmetrical ears of the owl, combined with the shape of their face, allows them to hear things really, really well. Now, moving down our body here, let's just talk about the color themselves. While they may stand out here, like this guy here, or a snowy owl there, owls are actually very well camouflaged. For things like the Screech Owl, which you find in boreal forests in Manitoba, brown and gray is going to be a very common color. So this guy, while he stands out with a bookcase behind me, these guys are very hard to see in the wild. And that goes for all of our owls. But another thing they have is actually something on the inside. Owls don't digest food the same way we do. Owls, actually as well as eagles, hawks, all birds of prey, they all do this. And you'll never think of an eagle the same way once I tell you this. Owls have two stomachs. Because remember I said they swallow their food whole, right? Well, not only are they swallowing the muscle and the stuff that they're actually going to digest, but they're also swallowing all the fur, all the teeth, and all the bones. So what happens is they have kind of a pre-stomach right here, where everything just goes for the first round. In that stomach, things get separated. So all of the things that can be digested, all the muscles, the eyes, basically all the gooey stuff, that gets separated and goes on to the next stomach to be absorbed just like us. Everything that's left up in that first stomach, things like the fur, the hair, teeth, bones, that all mats up into basically a fur ball. And essentially, once that stomach gets full, the owl spits out what we call an owl pellet. It's also one of my favorite things to do with schools when they were able to come here is if anyone's ever dissected an owl pellet, that's going through it looking for all the bones and teeth in there, people will sometimes ask, wait a minute, are we actually looking through owl poop? I go, no. It comes out their mouth. It's technically owl puke, but beside the point. Moving on down the owl, there's furthermore adaptations. One of them is on the wings, the feathers themselves. One of the cool things that owls can do is fly silently. This is a really good adaptation because, like I mentioned, the things that owls like to eat, mice, voles, shrews, rats where they are, and even in some cases, things like snowshoe hares, they all have one thing in common. Well, besides being a prey animal, they all have a really good sense of hearing. So one of the adaptations owls have to trump this is silent flight. Here's how they do it. First off, let's take a look at this feather right here. This is from a Canada goose. And if we look along the top of it, we can see it's pretty much just a flat line, even on the other side too. Flat, straight line. Now with an owl feather, the ends of the feather are frayed. This is a wing from a great horned owl here. And hopefully you guys can see this on the screen. But if you can see, the feather is frayed up along the edges of every single feather on the wings. This is important because this is how they fly silently. Now, how the heck does that work? With birds like crows or geese, we've all heard them, I'm assuming at some point, fly over us, and we hear that of the wings flapping. That's because, again, the end of the wing is flat. So the air has to move over the wing rather than through it, so it makes a noise. Like that. With an owl feather, because the feather is frayed, the air can move through it rather than over it. And they can fly silently. Now, the last adaptation we'll talk about on the owl as we move down the body to the feet. Now, this is where owls become really cool because for starters, not only do they have those nice big talons that we can see there, and they are still sharp for a couple of reasons, obviously gripping onto branches they're going to stay on, also for grabbing different types of food that they want. In addition to the talons, the feet themselves are unique. Owls have really, really strong feet, mainly for attacking and killing their prey. Now, how strong are we talking here? The great horned owl, which we'll see a picture of in a second, might be a little hard to see this guy up here, has the crushing power in their talons of 500 pounds per square inch. What does that mean? Well, think of it like this. Remember before COVID when we could actually shake hands with people? I'm sure we've all had a real good, squeezer handshake from somebody. The pounds per square inch of humans just squeezing our fists like this is about 20 pounds. What that means is this guy up here, if he was attacking my arm like he was attacking a piece of prey, if he hits it just right, he has the ability to break my arm. Not something you typically associate with a bird that's, 4 or 5 pounds. So now that we have a little bit of a better idea of what makes an owl special with their adaptations, let's take a look at some of the owls, or actually all the owls, that we have here in Manitoba. Now, all these pictures we're going to see here are actually from the Audubon website, which is a great site to check out if you want to know more about each individual owl. So first up is the great gray owl here, which was designated as Manitoba's provincial bird in 1987. So this 4-pound bird has the biggest wingspan of any owl in Canada at 5 feet. And this is what they sound like. Alrighty, let's take a look here. Now, as we can see from this range map, pretty much anywhere the boreal forest goes, the great gray owl follows. Similarly with this next owl here. So next up, we have the barred owl. So this is a little bit smaller than the great gray owl. This owl will dine on pretty much anything it can, including flying squirrels. So this owl also has the widest variety of calls anywhere in Manitoba. And I'm just getting the word that our audio is not working today. So what we'll do is we'll keep taking a look at the different owls that we have. But if anybody wants to hear what these sound like, go to the Audubon website and they have audios of every single owl that I'm going to show you here, as well as all the owls in North America. Oh. There's one coming through. So like I said with the barred owl, that one has about 13 different calls. That's just one of them. Now the barred owl falls a similar range to the great gray, calling the boreal forest home, especially here in Manitoba. Now this next owl that we're going to take a look at, keeping with the boreal theme here, this next owl is actually called the Boreal Owl. This owl is a little bit smaller. This 6-ounce owl is one of Manitoba's smallest owls and is actually sometimes preyed upon by pine martens and even goshawks, another type of raptor found in the boreal forest. Let's take a listen to this one. Very cool. Now, as the name implies that we can take a look at with this range map here, the boreal forest is the home of the boreal owl. Now for our next owl, we'll keep with the small ones. This is the eastern screech owl. one of the ones that I was showing a little bit earlier. This one has lots of different color phases. In Manitoba, it's more of a gray like we see here. Let's take a look at what it sounds like. Because they can have different calls. There he is. Good old horse on helium. Now, like I said, they have some different color phases. If you go down in Texas, they're actually a little bit more of a red, more browny color. Now, as we can see from this range map here, this owl just barely makes it into Manitoba, but we're still glad to have it. Now, next up is an owl everyone can probably recognize. One of the most commonly heard owls as well, the great horned owl. So this is the second heaviest owl in Canada. It comes in at about 5.5 pounds. And this owl is actually a wonderful demonstration of one sense that owls do not really have, and that is smell. Proof in the pudding, one of the great horned owl's favorite food is the striped skunk. So let's take a listen to this one. Yeah, we're getting back to our whoo-hoo type owls. Now, as we can see from this map here, there's a reason this is one of the most well-known owls, because pretty much anywhere in North America you go, you can find this owl. Now, for our next feathered friend, this one is a wonderful example of how scientists are as brilliant as they are unimaginative. For example, this owl looks like it has long ears, does it not? Well, this is called the long-eared owl. It's a medium-sized owl that is also known as a cat owl in some places. Let's take a listen to this one. Yeah, that one is a very quiet recording. Now, if we take a look at the range map, this is where this owl actually changes a little bit compared to some of the owls that we've seen already. So this is another boreal forest dwelling owl, but what separates it is that this owl is actually one that migrates. So if we take a quick look back at that range map for a second, you can see that similar to ducks and geese, you wouldn't run into this owl in Manitoba now. But if you give it a few more months, we will start hearing it once again. Our next owl here is actually one of my favorite looking ones. This is the northern hawk owl. Now, it gets its name from its resemblance to a hawk, especially in the face. And this is what this one sounds like. Have a bunch of shy owls this morning. Back to our boreal forest birds. This is another year-round resident that can be heard in Manitoba right now. Our next owl is very, very unique in that this is the northern Sawet Owl. This is the smallest owl in Manitoba. It weighs in at only 4 ounces, but it also has, I think, one of my favorite calls I've ever heard, especially from an owl. 4 ounces, by the way, is less than the size of this D battery that I'm holding right here. Very, very small bird. And as we see here, this little owl can pretty much be found anywhere in southern Manitoba. Our next owl we're going to take a look at, in keeping with the creatively named owls, this one looks kind of like it has short ears. No, it is called the short-eared owl. It's common in prairies and can sometimes migrate as far as Mexico. Young will leave the nest on foot about 2 to 3 weeks after hatching and can fly after about a month. Now they can walk away as this owl nests on the ground. Let's listen to this one. Yeah, so we can see not quite a lot of owls are sounding like that. Woo woo. That's normal. Now let's take a look at where we can find this one. This owl prefers prairie landscapes, and the short-eared owl is also migratory, spending its winters down south and then returning in the spring. The snowy owl here is the heaviest owl in Manitoba, weighing in at 6 pounds. Snowy owls can also lay between 3 and 11 eggs per season, which is much higher than most other owls in the province. Now let's have a listen at this one. So the snowy owl, we do have a chance at seeing right now because they migrate from the northern tundra in the winter to southern Manitoba and then return to the north for the summer. Now our last owl we have coming up here is a very cool one. This is the burrowing owl. They were also historically called howdy birds by cowboys, as they seem to nod their heads when they're seen. These little guys eat not only lots of small rodents, but up to 7,000 insects in a year. So let's hear this little guy. Kind of sounds like a small alarm clock. The burrowing owl just barely makes it into southwestern Manitoba, and it migrates in the winter months. Due to how few are left, not a lot is known. However, one that was banded in Manitoba was found 2 months later in the Gulf of Mexico near Louisiana. Now, when I say there weren't or aren't a lot left, I wasn't kidding. Since 1987, the Manitoba population of burrowing owls has declined approximately 96%, which is quite a big chunk. In 2016, there was a survey done, and in the entire province, only 18 burrowing owls were found in the wild. There's more, actually almost way more than you guys watching this webinar this morning than there were burrowing owls found throughout the entire province. So how the heck did that happen? Well, there's a number of reasons why species will become endangered and sometimes potentially extinct. Take our last online poll here to see if you can figure out what the deciding factor with the burrowing owl's population decline was. Was it maybe vehicle collisions, too many of them getting hit on the side of the road? Maybe pollution? Maybe it could even be habitat loss. Let's see how you guys do on this one here. Survey says, yeah, habitat loss. Overwhelming majority. Not just with the burrowing owl, but pretty much anytime a species becomes endangered and usually goes, sometimes can go extinct, it's because of habitat loss. You don't need a big fancy university degree to understand the idea that if you don't have a place to live, you're not going to live too long. Over the generations and over a long period of time, a lot of prairie habitat in Manitoba was converted into farmland. So the burrowing owl, as well as a lot of other prairie dwelling species, suffered some population declines. As far as I know, none more than the burrowing owl that we saw a moment earlier. Things are looking up, however. Since 2010, the Manitoba Burrowing Owl Recovery Program has worked with the Assiniboine Park Zoo in reintroducing burrowing owls into the wild. Since then, I believe it's just a little bit over 100 adult burrowing owls have been released into Manitoba. And actually last year, for the first time since 2011, a breeding pair of burrowing owls was observed in Manitoba in the wild. So we're on the right track, but we got to keep this going forward. Not just for burrowing owls, but for all owls in general. There's lots of different things that we can do to help our wonderful owl species to continue to thrive in Manitoba. One of the most important things is just to know more about them. So there's a few things you can do. One of them is participate in the Manitoba Nocturnal Owl Survey. There's lots of bird surveys that take place year-round, such as the Christmas bird count, schoolyard blitz programs, but all those are done during the day. Most owls are nocturnal, so a lot of them are missed during these bird studies that are taking place during the day. The Nocturnal Owl Survey takes place from late March to early April, as that's their breeding season. There is a way year-round you can help, however, and that is submitting any sightings or hearings of owls to the iNaturalist app. And all that information goes to our Manitoba data network, where scientists can access it. So you can help out all year via that. Another thing you could do is make a donation or learn more about the Lady Grail Fund or the Manitoba Burrowing Owl Recovery Program. The Lady Grail Fund via the Winnipeg Foundation is a fund that is in memory of a real owl, Lady Grail. She was an injured owlet that was taken from a nest in 1984. Her and her handler, Dr. Bob Nero, went to schools, shopping malls, senior centers, conservation programs to educate the public about owls and owl conservation. She passed in 2005 of natural causes, and the fund was enacted in her memory. So donations go to things like different conservation projects, owl research, as well as educating the public. Similar with the Manitoba Burrowing Owl Recovery Program, you can make donations by symbolically adopting a burrowing owl family for $200. Funds go to similar things, burrowing owl research, as well as educating the public. Or with the burrowing owl program, if you live in an area where there are burrowing owls, if you see or hear any, you can report those sightings to that program. One of the easiest things that all of us across the province can do to really appreciate and help our owls is go on a night hike. This is a great thing to do with our household right now. Go on a night hike and just listen for owls. It's really cool to actually hear animals like these, owls, loons, wolves, in their natural habitat. It's a great way to connect with nature. Another thing you can do is take a highway drive or go along some of the grid roads out along the province, the border of the province or the city, and look for snowy owls. Because like I said, they have migrated down south for this time of the year. Taking photos has also been very common and very popular on social media of owls. One thing we do want to stress though is no matter what type of wildlife you're taking a photo of, make sure you can maintain a reasonable distance and obviously do not feed any of the wildlife. By doing all this, hopefully owls will be around for many generations to come, and our kids and our grandkids can go to appreciate these animals just like we have today. So I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning to learn a little bit more about owls. And now, if anybody hasn't already, you can enter a question into the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer those.
Hi, Adam. So far, we do have one question for you.
All right.
And this is, what is /R the names First Nation communities from Manitoba gave to some owl species? Do you happen to know that?
Off the top of my head, I actually do not know. There is a name, all the animals that are out here do have Anishinaabe or Ojibwe names. The owl one, I actually don't know.
All right. Another one was just wondering if you could repeat again what app that was that you could use.
The app I mentioned is the iNaturalist app.
Is it true that owls have really long legs? We saw a picture that shows the legs extended and not sure if it's true.
So some owls worldwide and in Manitoba do have really long legs. In Manitoba, for the most part, the only ones that really have the legs that extend out of the body that is commonly seen is the burrowing owl. And this is because, as their name implies, they not only live on the prairies, but they do live underground. So a lot of times they can fly, but since they're more ground-dwelling animals, their legs are a little bit longer.
Are owls known to go after small dogs?
Officially, I would say Probably not. Mostly just because little dogs, especially in provincial parks, they should be on a leash and under control. So wouldn't think you'd have to worry about an owl coming and swooping a dog while it's on your leash. That's one of the reasons why it's important to make sure your dog is on leash and under control in provincial parks.
What is the most common owl seen inside of the Winnipeg city limits?
Inside the city of Winnipeg, the most common one would probably, I would say, be the great horned owl, just because it is one of the most common owls found on the continent, let alone in Manitoba.
It says, hello, we live in Winnipeg and our neighbor saw a great horned owl in his tree. Should we be worried about letting our cat out with a big owl in the neighborhood?
Be a good idea to be aware of it, but like with any animal, when you let it outside, keep your eye on it. And since it has warmed up a little bit now, go outside, get some fresh air, and be outside with your pet.
Wondering how many owls are lost due to prey being poisoned, like mice and rats.
You know what? Off the top of my head, I actually don't know that.
Does Manitoba use any data off of the eBird app?
Off the eBird app. We probably do, but I don't know 100% for sure. I'd have to look into that.
Do you happen to know what the smallest owl worldwide is?
The smallest owl worldwide is the elf owl. This is found in portions of the United States as well as the southern portion of Mexico. Full grown, it weighs about 1 ounce and is about 4 inches tall. It's about the size of a sparrow, or, actually, about the size of this deck of cards here.
Why do some owls have ear tufts?
Why do some owls have ear tufts? Partly the same reason why some owls or some animals have other features that don't really seem to hold a purpose. They just adapted them over time, and they don't really impede the animal's ability to live in its habitat. It's kind of like how dolphins, for some reason, evolved to kind of have a smiling face. Doesn't mean they're happy. It's just one of those kind of accidents of evolution that didn't prohibit it from living in its habitat.
Where is a good place to go for a night hike?
So a good place to go for a night hike, depending on where you are, there are places in the city. Going to places like areas around maybe the Fort White Alive Center or even in Assiniboine Park, anywhere there's lots of trees and lots of food, like there's still mice and shrews around, you have a chance at potentially hearing owls. And of course, any of our provincial parks. You can come out, of course, while social distancing, in those parks in the city as well as outside, and there's a good chance of hearing owls.
Do owls sleep in holes in trees, or do they sleep on the branches?
Most sleep in holes in trees.
Many sleep on branches though too. Any tips for finding snowy owls?
Best thing for finding a snowy owl right now is, like I mentioned before we started our questions, going on a drive along the highway, especially out in the prairies. Like if you're going up kind of around Stonewall or just anywhere kind of around the border of Manitoba where you still have the prairies. It's a very similar habitat to what they're used to up north. It's where they're used to finding food like lemmings up north or mice and shrews down here. Most common place you probably find them is sitting on either telephone poles or even on barbed wire fence posts along the ditches near the highway.
Ooh, this is a great question. What is your favorite owl and why?
My favorite owl is the great gray owl because A, it's the provincial bird of Manitoba, but it's also not only the largest owl size-wise in Manitoba, but it's also the largest owl in Canada.
We were wondering if anyone has seen snowy owls in or around the city.
Well, I don't live in the city, but I imagine a lot of people have. Based on social media, there have been a lot of people posting pictures of seeing snowy owls out in those areas that I was talking about.
I happened to see one the other day on Highway 2, just outside of the perimeter.
Very cool. Most of the owls I see out here in the boreal forest are things like great gray owls or actually hawk owls in some places.
Can I upload owl photos onto iNaturalist?
I believe you can. There should be, I think there is an option where you can upload photos if desired.
Do you happen to know what the biggest owl worldwide is?
The biggest owl worldwide is the eagle owl. It's found over in Europe. And oddly enough, it actually has the same wingspan of the great gray owl that we have here of 5 feet, but they can get a little bit heavier. The eagle owl can be about 3 to 8 pounds at its heaviest.
Do great horned owls hunt at all during the day?
Sometimes. This is one of the unique things with animals being designated nocturnal or diurnal, diurnal being active during the day. Very few animals are like us, where we sleep for a solid 6 to 8 hours at once. While owls and other animals do sleep, they do it kind of sparingly. For example, wolves are technically nocturnal, but I see them during the day all the time, same as owls. So they could be out hunting during the day if they're hungry, but the main time that they like to go hunting is usually during the crepuscular hours. That's kind of the very early morning or late evening, as well as during night when they are most active.
I found a deceased snowy owl in my backyard. I took it to the conservation office where they said it was a juvenile that starved to death. Do you know why that would happen?
A number of reasons. Could you tell us where you found it? Was it in the city or somewhere rural?
I think it sounds like it was in the city.
Okay.
Reasons why they would be starving. Do you happen to know?
That does happen with some animals. It's kind of one of the natural orders of just natural selection of the animals that are able to feed the best. They're the ones that are able to survive. So some just maybe don't find enough food and they do starve to death. It does happen sometimes.
You have a lot of questions. I'm just filtering through here.
It's all good.
Someone saw a great horned owl and a sawet about 4 meters apart. Do you think the great horned was hunting the sawet? Will they eat smaller owls?
For starters, yeah, they will eat smaller owls. The fact that they were 4 feet apart, depending on how long it was, is kind of interesting. Would have made a good YouTube video. But yeah, sometimes larger owls will go after smaller owls for sure.
Do owls have any predators?
Yes, so some of the smaller owls, things like the Screech Owl I showed you and a number of the other smaller ones, there are predators that will happen in trees a lot. Things like, I'm sure if a fisher could get a hold of them, they would go after it. But pine martens, as well as I had mentioned, as well as larger owls will go after smaller owls as well. For some of the bigger owls, really the only thing I could imagine going after them, because they are so sleek and getting away, would maybe be eagles or larger raptors, but even then it would be probably not very common.
How are owl populations doing in Manitoba besides the burrowing owls?
As far as we know, most other owls are doing very good. The only one that is technically officially endangered is, of course, the burrowing owl.
Kaya, who is 6 years old, wants to know why it is bad luck to see an owl by day in Scotland. Do you know that? Do you know why?
Off the top of my head, I don't know why some people in Scotland think it's bad luck to see an owl during the day. If we follow that, I'm going to have very bad luck, because I've seen about 4 great gray owls during the day this winter so far.
Can you share your contact information for anyone to have any further questions?
So if anybody has any questions for me, they can email me directly at adam.collutt@gov.mb.ca. And my direct phone number in my office is 204-369-3157.
What can I do to attract owls to my yard where a great horn is hanging out?
Attracting owls to your yard is a little difficult, and actually something that is probably not advised, because especially things like great horned owls or great gray owls, the large ones, the only things that you could attract them with would be things like meat, which are also going to attract things like wolves, raccoons. In the summer, it's going to attract bears and a lot of other things that you don't want in your yard. So attracting owls to your yard is not the best idea. Much better idea would be to go out where they are and try to see them in their own natural habitat.
Could you please offer some tips for what owl behavior to look for, so we know we are not harassing them when we are observing them? Thank you.
Okay. If they start, well, for starters, in most cases, if they really outside of breeding season, which is again that late March to early April, I mean, all year you want to keep a safe distance from wildlife to make sure you don't disturb anything, whether it's an owl, a fox, whatever it may be. But another thing, they may start hooting a little more, making a lot more noise. In most cases, though, if you get too close to it, it's just going to fly away.
Will talking while hiking scare owls away?
Yes. In addition to virtually every other type of wildlife around. In summer, it's between actually the May long weekend and Thanksgiving, it's definitely advisable if you're out in places where there are black bears. But yeah, it also means you're probably not going to encounter an owl.
Okay. Are owls territorial? If so, how big would these be?
They can be territorial. And I know the territories are large, but depending, going from owl to owl, I'm not sure exactly what the square mileage of each territory would be.
Now somebody is wondering about nests. I know we don't have time to go over each individual owl and their nesting habitat, but could you give us maybe a couple different examples of the different, if some of them nest or where they would nest or different types of habitat where they would sleep in overnight?
Sure. So as far as nests go, for pretty much all our larger owls, especially things like the great gray owl, one of the unique things is they actually don't build nests themselves. They look for old nests from crows or really any bird that they can kind of reuse as their own nest. And that's an adaptation, another adaptation they have to not waste energy, precious energy, on building a nest. Now, those are for the ones that will go up in trees. Things like snowy owls or short-eared owls will also nest on the ground because those are common in more flat prairie type areas.
Right. Are owls solitary or do they pair up or flock?
For the most part, I don't believe owls will flock. They will pair up during breeding season. And in some cases, the male will go out and bring food back, but the female is the one that sits on the nest.
Okay. Do you know if owls have any interesting mating rituals?
Like most animals, I am sure they do. Off the top of my head, I don't know. And actually, just a random tidbit that popped into my head in terms of do owls group together, just because I remember the random word. If you do see a group of owls, the technical term is called a parliament. If you see a number of owls, you are seeing a parliament of owls.
Do you know if owls are monogamous?
I'd actually have to double check on that. I know other raptors are monogamous. In most cases, owls probably are, but I'd have to double check on that.
Now, somebody was just wondering if you know that would owls be hunting things like nestlings and eggs?
They could be, like nestlings from other types of animals they're talking about.
Yes, I would assume so.
Yeah. In some cases, they probably could. Really, as long as something is moving and catches their eye, they're kind of like T-Rexes from Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park, not Jurassic World. Jurassic Park, where if you're still, it's not going to pay attention to you because it's not moving. So for things like mice and voles, they're moving. Owls only want live stuff. So when they see something moving, that's what they're going to go after. So if they saw something that was moving like that, they could go after it.
Now, somebody is wondering if they could put up an owl bird box. Is there a design that would be best? For example, would a great horned owl nest in a box?
They could. This is actually one of the ways that scientists and owl experts will band owls and try to build habitat for them, is just like there are bat boxes and small bird boxes. Yeah, there are some different designs for owl boxes that are out there. I don't have any off the top of my head, but they're like all other types of bird houses, designs are out there.
All right, that's the last of the questions.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening. And I just want to remind everybody that when you do visit parks, to follow COVID-19 public health orders and physical distance from anyone not in your household. I want to thank you all very much for joining me this morning. And if this has made you interested in other webinars, our next one is taking place next Saturday on February 27th at 10 a.m., where we're going to get an inside look at the Whiteshell fish hatchery, not just the stuff outside, but also the stuff inside the building that is always closed off to the public. So details and registration for that program are available at manitobaparks.com, as well as our Manitoba Facebook page. So make sure everybody takes care and stay safe.